and welcome to the 10th and final seminar of the Femmes du Vin Harvest series. Thank you so much for all of you who have tuned in. As you know, this is a pay what you can seminar, but Femmes du Vin has told me that they've actually raised over $20,000 in scholarships for women in our trade. So this is very, very exciting. The topic today is the World Wide Web. And I had to say this a bunch of times this morning. It's quite a tongue twister, but we're going to be talking about what happened since COVID, how we're all coping, strategies, new ways of promoting ourselves and promoting wine culture and sales of wine culture. So it's going to be an exciting topic of conversation. Now, I know that most of you have probably seen the New York Times article mentioning the real struggles that women have had in our industry. And Femmes du Vin has at least made an initial statement regarding this topic already. And so you can go to social media to view that. But please do stay tuned because Femmes du Vin is working hard on a strategic plan, which will be unveiled on their website shortly. So a few housekeeping items before I introduce our panelists so that you're all aware. This seminar will be 90 minutes and it will be 60 minutes of roundtable discussion with our esteemed panelists, followed by 30 minutes of question and answer. So we're going to ask you if you wouldn't mind saving your questions until the end, or if you would like to ask them on the chat during, so you don't forget. We will have a team behind the scenes that will be looking at those questions and vetting them, and will give them to us or feed them to us during the question and answer period. So very exciting now. I'm going to start introducing our panelists, as I mentioned. I'm going to start with Magdalena Pesci, who is the Marketing and Communication Manager of Wines of Argentina, but very exciting. Soon she will be she'll be the general manager, the new general manager of Wines of Argentina as of the new year. She is a mom and she's had an extensive career working globally. For example, for Oddbins Wine Merchants in London, as well as in Valencia, Spain, in Hong Kong. So she has traveled quite extensively. She's responsible for generating with her team strategies and actions for the positioning of Argentina wine brand in the world. She's also called upon by many academic institutes for her skills in speaking regarding global wine sales and creating global wine communities. So very pleased to have you. Hello, Magdalena.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm very honored to be here today, so thank you.
Well, we're absolutely delighted to have you. I'd like to introduce Madeleine Paquette as well here, who is the Chief Design Officer of Folly Enterprises. And Madeleine, I have to say, I love the title of Design Officer, because really your website is a lot about visuals and it's really captivated a very broad audience. She co-founded Wine Folly in 2011, and she went on to win the Wine Blog of the Year in 2013. And this is a website that hosts an astounding 15 million unique visitors a year. So she will certainly have a lot to say about creating a distinctive web. She's also the author of 2 books, one of which was a New York Times bestseller and a James Beard Award winner. And she has facilitated thousands of over 1,000 articles on the topic of wine. Right now, and I'm looking forward to hearing her speak about this, but she is working on a new project called the Global Wine Database, which is like a global wine networking tool. Madeleine, welcome to the panel.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Tahira Habibi to the group here. She is certainly an acclaimed and accomplished and very well-respected sommelier. She launched the Hue Society as a safe space for community to learn, commune, and find resources all in one place. It's a cultural space for the Black community to share their developments and experience in wine. Tierra is actually the first Black woman to grace the cover of Wine Enthusiast 40 Under 40. And she's been featured in Ocean Drive as one of the top 5 female sommeliers. She recently co-founded the Roots Fund, a not-for-profit creating new educational pathways, financial assistance, and career opportunities for Black and Indigenous people to become successful in the wine industry. Tahira, welcome to the panel.
Hi, thank you.
Wonderful. Now that we're all here, I thought I'd start by asking some questions and have you all contribute to the discussion. So I first want to start with Tahira, and I know that there are a lot of sommeliers that are watching right now or watching the seminar right now. And a lot has changed for sommeliers in this new COVID reality. We know that restaurants are really, really struggling in some areas more than others, especially with continued closures. And somms are looking for new outlets and new ways of connecting. And online has become the best medium to do so. So Tira, how has life changed for you as a sommelier and for some of your colleagues in this new COVID reality?
I think in the beginning, it was really tough for a lot of people to kind of figure out how we were going to pivot. And I think that it's still pretty tough for a lot of people who, you know, being a somm is kind of like an in-person thing. And so it's a little difficult to do that from a computer sometimes, but virtual tastings are all the rave now. I'm not sure we'll ever go back to like the full in-person thing because you know that that's an option now. I, this whole time, had been getting a slew of requests for, you know, virtual tastings, be it private or for groups and stuff like that. And a lot of times I would just call up my somm friends like, hey, do you need, you know, you need to do a tasting because you can have this one. Or, you know, I put a group of women together and we started kind of passing them along. Well, I was passing them to people like, hey, you know, you need a tasting or whatever. And I just really wanted to make sure everybody was okay. So I think that it's a good pivot at this moment because, you know, you can still reach a lot of people. I think that in the beginning, it was trying to figure out how to get the wine to different states or, you know, how to, you know, get the tasting kits together and all of that stuff. But we weren't the only ones who had to adjust. Like the wineries had to adjust too. So when they started putting them in sample size bottles and sending them out and all that kind of stuff, it made it a lot easier. And a lot of brands also started creating smaller tasting kits as well. So it started to become easier and it's actually more accessible now, as long as you're in a state that you can ship wine to, because that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah.
That's interesting that you mentioned that the industry is sort of supporting this new movement as well for sommeliers, which is really, really great to see that there is this kind of support. Do you have any advice for somms maybe willing to do this or interested in doing this, but not quite sure how to go about it? What kind of communities should they tap into, or are there any resources that you've used that are?
Right now it's holiday time. So this is like the perfect time because everybody's missing their holiday parties. So what I have found is, you know, looking into bigger industries like outside of restaurants, right? Start thinking medical, start thinking financial institutions who would normally have these big lavish holiday parties, but right now they can't. And so being able to offer a virtual tasting during their reception portion is a great step. And it's also a great way to make money like very fast. And because, you know, you pretty much know everybody's going to be in the same space for the most part there. Like, you know, you don't have to ship wines to 3 different states and all the rest of stuff like with private tastings. So I would definitely say like start looking and tapping into the holiday season, you know, start creating offerings for that. Start creating packages for, you know, wine tastings or entertainment tastings or whatever. Partner with other people to create packages. you know, if you have a friend who sings and they can travel, their voice travels well through Zoom, package it together, you know, singing and wine. There's sometimes who tell jokes, which, you know, is my favorite. Partner with them, like, or figure out other things that you can ship with the service, you know, but you have to, like, the competition is starting to rev up as far as like the virtual world. So now you have to start thinking about, how do I make myself stand out, or how do I create something that people would be interested in, still be affordable, but also, you know, be able to sustain myself until we get off punishment.
I like the idea that you mentioned of partnering with other people, perhaps who have other talents or in other industries that may be able to really help and facilitate what you're doing and draw a greater audience and crowd. So one more thing I wanted to ask you about some of your educational opportunities at this time. So I've heard of people now saying, okay, well, maybe this is a good time to study more. And, you know, we generally during the year will do a lot of in-person tastings that are facilitated by various Wines Of organizations. Are you finding as many invitations now from Wines Of organizations? And do you think that this is a good time to study, or it's too uncertain?
No, I definitely think it's a great time to study. I mean, I don't know about certification wise, but I do know that a lot of wineries, because they're not able to hit the market the way that they normally would, are very keen on sending packages. Like, they'll send you samples, or they'll send you, you know, a couple bottles for you to taste through. And that is the studying, right? When we think about studying, we're not talking just about books. You can buy a book and read it, but the actual education comes from actually being able to taste through the wines. Santa Lucia had a great program in the beginning of the year a few months ago, and almost their entire collection of wineries were sending out a bottle or two and tasting notes and all the rest of that stuff for you to study. And, you know, and then they get on a Zoom call and, you know, you'll have the winemakers explaining things. And those are things you can set up yourself too, right? Like, if you want to get into a specific region, there's a new region that, you know, just came out. Madeline could speak more to this because she's definitely tapped into that, or something like that. You can reach out and say, hey, listen, I really want to taste your wines. I'm very interested, and see if you can get them to send you a package with the tasting notes on, you know, from how they see their product. And then you sit and taste through it. You can do it with your friends. If you get a bottle and you have friends in the same area, it's very easy to split that up. And that's how you study together. Like, during this time, you can do a spaced out, socially distanced study group, or, you know, do it virtually, or, you know, you guys pull together some money and pick a region and buy all of those wines from that region. And even if you're in different states, you can still do that. Everybody get the same bottle. You get on Zoom, you compare tasting notes, you know, all of that stuff. So I think what has absolutely been proven is that you don't have to be face-to-face to continue your education and or to expand on the things that you want. It might be a little bit easier now because people are like very willing to send you product because they can't get to the market. So they have to reach people somehow, right?
That's a good point, and reaching you through wine. Sharon, I want to ask you shortly about two very important initiatives that you began before COVID, and how, you know, how it's changed and how the response has changed post-COVID, the Hughes Society in particular, and the Roots Fund. But I'm going to bring in Magdalena. I want to ask her a few questions about wine and marketing on the topic that you just mentioned, you know, how much people are sending wine and really wanting you to be able to taste and facilitating that. So Magdalena, you know, having worked for marketing for associations in particular, right now Argentina, as well as wine shops, can you tell me how significantly has your business through Wines of Argentina been affected by COVID?
Well, it's an interesting question, because at Wines of Argentina, we've been doing online communication since early 2010, I think. But now the challenge was even bigger. Right now, I think that it may look bleak because face-to-face trade events, which was our main business, are impossible, but in some months are going to bounce back. And that being said, it will likely go through a period of adjustment before big tasting rooms or trade shows like ProWine, which is very important for us, will be similar with what we used to have or remember. And in fact, as pandemic persists, plans for in-person events shifted to Q3 of 2021, according to different surveys I've been reading in the past week. So the wine industry and wines of Argentina right now needs to work together and be flexible. We are facing, well, this maze of new realities, and we have to cope with that. Our organization has been lucky, as I said before, because we already have some training with online communications, but the rest of the wineries or some of our members don't. So we are helping them to get online quicker than it should be without a pandemic, I think.
So you mentioned, interestingly, face-to-face tastings, and for us in the trade, you know, we've been exposed to many face-to-face tastings. Now, when we think about it, it seems, oh my goodness, what a, you know, something that you may not want to do again or may change inevitably. Now, you've had to go from putting together these large face-to-face tastings to more online events. Do you find that those online events give you greater reach? And do you think that post-COVID, these types of tastings will stick or will go back to the way it was previously?
Well, the COVID recent disruption allowed brands like us, for instance, to evaluate whether they really needed in-person trade shows to market the wines. So in the wake of COVID-19's widespread cancellations, many of us, I mean, not just Wines of Argentina, but many wines of, decided our more efficient strategy was to move much of our marketing budget into less costly substitutes, doing a serious investment in digital marketing and online events, for instance. So in these past months, we have been working mainly in three alternatives that have been gaining traction. The first of us was start holding virtual special events on social media, because they are more comprehensive and exhaustive than webinars, and we can also host our campaign launch or make announcements for the industry insiders or journalists, and stream such events online to reach a broader worldwide audience. Also, we start attending virtual trade shows as the cost of traveling to and attending trade shows became higher, and it's also impossible to travel right now. This type of events provide the industry-wide exposure of an in-person show while saving a lot of money and also keeping you. And finally, as Tahira was saying, the educational program is booming right now. We are focusing on education. And of course, holding virtual events is easier and you can reach more and more people. So I think that as people get more comfortable using technology and attending virtual events, it likely become increasingly popular within the wine industry. And as Tahira said as well, even once the ban on mass gathering is lifted, we could still see people hosting virtual events rather than traveling to attend physical ones. So it's a challenge, but it's interesting.
It is very interesting because you're charged with keeping a global community informed about Argentinian wines, which is no easy task in this type of light, but I applaud the strategy that you are taking. But you know, how have the sales been impacted? Are people, you know, are wineries struggling because of this, or do they find that people are actually consuming more? It hasn't, you know, it hasn't changed as much since the onset?
Well, I think that staying home gives you more or creates new opportunities to drink wine. And in fact, e-commerce sales are booming right now for our category. So that's why in the past 6 months, we have designed a new business plan for the next 2 years aimed to taking our mission to another level, to establish a digital presence for Vino Argentino with much greater force, and thus continue contributing to the global success of our industry. And of course, the consolidation of Argentina as a modern country in terms of winemaking and as a producer of premium wines. So online wine sales will just keep growing as consumers get used to buy their wines on these platforms. And of course, we are starting to receive the data, and we start working with Wine Searcher, Wine.com, Vivino. I mean, we used to do some things with them, but now we are really creating special strategies to work with these platforms. And
Is that to make it easier for consumers to purchase?
Yes, it's easier, but the real question for me is if this will increase, if this increase will be enough to mitigate the losses generated by the fall in the on-trade. Because the on-trade was very important for us. I mean, it is not only for us, but for many wines, for many brands. So my objective right now is how can Wines of Argentina be part of the solution in the future? Because I don't see the COVID situation stopping in the next 12 months. So I have to confess that I certainly don't have the answer yet.
Yeah.
But everything points to it being a great challenge.
Magdalena, you were actually quite innovative, and especially Wines of Argentina has been quite innovative prior to COVID, so that must help out a lot. I also just quickly wanted to mention my Femmes du Vin colleagues wanted me to let you know about the hashtag FDV Harvest 2020. And so you can use that to continue the discussion here too. I know there's a lot of interesting points that are being mentioned. So if you want to communicate those or ask further questions on social media, you definitely can. As well as at Femmes du Vin, you can use that at to tag us in posts. I have so many more questions for you. I want to bring in Madeline to the discussion now. And talking about the online community that she has created. Madeline, you created before COVID, and you chose to use a lot of visuals, a lot of very colorful visuals, and your background being in graphic design. How much do you think has attracted visitors? Because 15 million unique visitors is pretty impressive a year.
Well, looking at, if we actually back out and we look at some analytics that were happening during the big moment of COVID, which was March, April of this year, we saw a massive spike in visitors to the site. When you're looking at 1,000 pieces of content, it's really about, I'm definitely like a super wine geek and I love to talk about wine, but like when I get into talking about analytics and geeky stuff, I can kind of like nerd out a bit. So please stop me if I go in too weird or whatever. So looking at 1,000 articles and plus, we're talking about long tail, right? There's so many people looking at our content, and we've got a few pieces we know are like major most popular pieces, but then we have this long tail stuff, and that's what builds your 15 million visitors per year. So when COVID hit, we saw like a massive uptick, which meant people were looking online to find answers to wine questions and seeking out wine during a moment when they couldn't leave their houses, right? So instead of going to their traditional methods of searching for wine answers, maybe going to a store or just looking at the back of a label or something like that, they were actually using the web to surf and to search and to find answers to their questions, which obviously it was great for us because we were like, oh my God, the site traffic's going up like gangbusters. We were scared to death, actually. The entire team is remote. There's about 10 people working for Wine Folly right now. And we were like, all right, are we gonna, or will we be downsizing? But that was actually a really nice indicator to see that people do still care about wine, even when you have an international pandemic happening. But getting to the part about graphics, when I look at wine information online, I'm really looking at, why do you care to seek out this information? Who are you? Why do you care to seek out this information? And how do I serve it to you in a way that you won't like rage quit my site, right? Because we have these users who come in and they look, and I can look at the time spent on an article, right? How long somebody actually looks at an article. And when I have great success, the time on that article is about how long the article is. And I have some sweet spots that I need to write towards to like build the content. And what I've discovered is that people are 80% more visual than they are like at reading or even listening. So if you're listening to this right now, like, whew, you got to work out. You got to use this part of your brain. It's a different part of your brain to listen to things. It's a different part of your brain to read things and translate words into text, which makes sense inside your brain. But visuals, instant understanding. So as a designer, it was like a natural step to be like, every single topic must have a visual that explains that topic visually. It must have that. And if the visual fails to explain that topic, then that article will not be successful. And that's the truth. That's what we've seen in the amount of content that we've done over the past almost 10 years. And it's really like the driving force of what is user experience. Like just using your phone and clicking on buttons and getting frustrated with, oh, it's not working for me. That is actually part of this whole system of communicating. So communication, I call myself a wine communicator. It goes far beyond using words. It's maybe I'm doing video, maybe I'm doing images, maybe I'm carrying a story out on Instagram that's like a long tail idea, like exploring a topic. And you're using all these different ways to bring people into the topic of wine. So yes, I'm a designer. That's my background, but it was trying to get at what is the best way to help somebody become passionate about wine. Not necessarily, oh, I like to make pretty pictures and I'm going to do them about wine, but like, is the picture the right thing to answer that question? So I don't use pictures as decoration. I use them far more tactfully in our content. Okay.
I think that's really important for those that are creating online content to keep in mind that point. But in addition to the visual content, you also have written and you've also curated and commissioned many, many articles on your website. And, you know, as we were speaking with Zahir before about finding new options for sommeliers to use their talents in the industry, writing might be something that some might get involved in. And I know certain people say, no, absolutely not. But if those who are interested in writing and getting their foot in the door here, how do you work with writers? How do you choose content that way? Like, would you have any advice in particular for those that are interested in getting involved in writing?
Yeah. How much information do you want? So I will say if you're a writer and you're just getting into it, or you're thinking about it as an option and you really want to try to build your writing, you know you have a voice. Remember that. Keep that in there, right? That's the first thing. You are a person, you have feelings, you have a voice, you have this thing that is you, that is your unique contribution to the wine world. That it's taken me a long time to accept my own personal voice, and you may already know yours or not. So that this is an ongoing process, is building your voice. The second thing is, if you're writing for pubs, they have a voice. Each pub has a voice it's speaking to, a demographic it's speaking to, right? And that voice is, and we're not even talking about tactical and how you're supposed to craft the article or anything like that, but the voice of that publication. And that voice, guaranteed, is built on the people they're writing to, their demo. So who is that demo? Who is the demo that you're writing towards? And I'm not talking about race or women versus men or aliens versus pterodactyls. I'm talking about, like, are we writing for people who like have about how much money can they spend on wine, right? That's actually a real metric. It doesn't matter who you are. How much money can you spend on wine, to me, is a demographical thing, because it limits what kind of wines you can actually talk about. Where they are in their career. That doesn't matter who you are, but where you are in your career really focuses how you interact with wine and why you're interacting with wine. So learning that from your publication is a really important thing. Like for us, it's like, for me, if you can write to the wine beginner, right? I'm very interested in what you have to say. Can you write to a wine beginner in such a way that not only does it make it very easy for them to understand that topic, which might be very complex, but it makes them excited about drinking wine? I am interested in what you're writing, if that's something that you can do. And I'll tell you that. And every pub will tell you, hey, or if you could be like, hey, I'm interested in writing for your pub. Can you give me some more information about your demographic? Do you have any sheets on that already that I can use? Because I want to get started on something. I want to pitch you some ideas. So pitching ideas is something we often get as publications. A lot of times, though, we are planning out our content far in advance. And so when you're pitching ideas, you kind of want to know, like, is it immediate? Like if you have something that's very newsworthy that's happening right now and you can write to it, you might have an opportunity to slip right in. But if you have a topic that you might plan maybe 6 months in advance and look ahead 6 months from now and write something topical to that time period. Printed pubs have about a 3 month. They're about 3 months ahead. So maybe think 3 to 4, 5 months ahead. Someone like me, I'm about a month ahead, right? Generally in content speaking. So an online publication is usually a little bit faster turnaround. Right. So that would be something I might consider as a writer. I could go into this more, like talking about tactics, but you might
have you had an uptake in the amount of pitches in the past 6 months? Are people really excited about getting involved in that medium? I
would say if you'd like to pitch us some of your work, send an email to info@winefolly.com. We're always looking. We did a really massive call out early, like in January or something like that, for writers. And we took on about 20 new writers to the site. And we've been sort of working through our thing, because the majority, if you look at the site's content, the majority of the content I've actually written. So it's like been me trying to figure out how to teach people to write in the voice of Wine Folly, and who it's for, and what type of articles are we still short on. But yeah, we're always looking for someone. If you have a particular, I'm really looking for people with a particular expertise on a topic. I don't care if you're general, like we got generalists, right. But if you're an expert on a specific thing and you know how to communicate it simply and beautifully, like, please talk to me.
Yeah. Thank you, Madeline. That's really interesting. And there are a few points I'm going to bring up again later. Tiara, I wanted to go back, and actually this is, what Madeline is saying is bringing up the topic of community and of using our voices. Now, in our collective consciousness right now, diversity is more and more important. And you have created a couple of communities here that really are fostering education among Black and Indigenous people within our wine trade. And for us here, I can in particular say in Canada, this is really sorely lacking in our community. Could you tell us a little bit about the Hughes Society and what it facilitates?
Sure. So Hughes Society is about building a communal space for people to be able to be themselves, which doesn't exactly exist in the wine space as it stands for a person of color. There is a lot of gatekeeping and assimilation tactics, which, you know, we kind of fall under, we kind of become indoctrinated into. And so outside of answering the question, do Black people drink wine, there also needed to be a visual of Black people drinking wine in their own element and enjoying it the way that they need to enjoy it. And so getting rid of the, you know, implicit bias, getting rid of the microaggressions, like not having to deal with code switching and all of that stuff, and just being able to enjoy wine like everybody else in our own space and see other people doing it as well. Because you know, it was so spread out at one point that was a question, like, it's a ridiculous question, but, you know, it was a question, and I just felt like I needed to visually answer that. So outside of the visuals, you know, we also provide resources for people getting into the wine industry. We also provide access to things that you wouldn't normally have access to in the wine industry as a person of color, because they're not readily available for you. And, you know, you're generally not the target of a lot of these programs and initiatives. And so I would be very happy when the day comes where these things aren't needed, honestly. But to this point, you know, I started going beyond, you know, the online and creating smaller communities, which, you know, are chapters in different cities. And with that, what I'm really doing is funneling any resources that I have back down into the community so that they also will have those resources. So, you know, we're talking about study groups like we were talking about earlier. A lot of times there are not people of color who are able to study together and have access to the wines that are actually going to help develop their palate to do that. And so with these chapters in each city, you're able to commune with people who are like-minded, who look like you, and know that you can be yourself while you learn and enjoy wine. And I just think that is revolutionary because, you know, you have people who are novice and just complete enthusiasts. And then you have people who have reached the pinnacle of their career in these chapters. And that is something that, you know, really focusing on it being a community-based thing with wine as a focus versus trying to build an organization that is focused on gatekeeping and, you know, cherry picking who you want to join, because wine is for everybody. So everyone should be able to have access to it and not just the stuff that's full of like wood chips and stuff.
And do you think the online medium of this has increased accessibility to more diverse populations, or did online come after creating these communities? Because you mentioned the importance of actually having face-to-face communication, building communities in various cities where people can interact with each other. But as the online forum, do you think that there's any benefit to accessibility and increasing diversity?
Yeah, we're definitely doing it. And that's why city to city is important, because, you know, you partner with the people in that city who want to help with the resources. And, you know, you can still do online tastings and, you know, create tasting kits. And I have 2 tonight, Madeline.
Wow.
So, you know, I have one in New York at 6 o'clock and one in Atlanta at 6:30, you know, that I kind of have to pop in between, but it's definitely doable. I think that at this point, what is being created is a lack of excuses. So there's no reason for people to say they didn't know how to help, they didn't know where to help, they didn't know where to find people, you know, and the communities are for everybody. I have to keep the center of that in a BIPOC position, so to speak, because, you know, that space needs to be safe, right? It needs to be a place where we can go and do our thing and enjoy each other without having to think about, oh, you know, am I breaking somebody else's rules, yada, 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 yada. So while everybody's obviously invited, and I call it the cookout, and I'm sure you probably heard that term online, like you're invited to the cookout. But you just know that coming into the space, it's just going to be a little bit of a different experience about who's being centered.
Right. It's interesting also having to monitor an online space that way to make sure that it's inclusive and that it's safe for everybody. Can you tell us also a little bit about the fund that you've created and how people can have access to this, the Roots Fund?
The Roots Fund, Carlton, McCoy, and I went from an argument to a nonprofit, basically, is what happened. And so Carlton and I both come from the same kind of neighborhood as far as it being like an inner city neighborhood. Neither of us grew up with like wine. We had a lot very similar upbringing. Obviously, he went a more formal traditional route and I went another route with the wine space. But we both realized very quickly our goals were aligned in the same thing. And that is to create access for people who come from neighborhoods like us into the wine space. And that had to happen in a couple different ways, because most people, when they think about wine, they think about front of the house, they think about somms, they think about winemakers, they think about those things. But, the wine business is, where we're at 70 billion now or something like that. And there are tons of jobs that you can get in the wine industry. And what we find with a lot of organizations is that instead of saying, hey, you can come and do whatever you want, it's kind of like, hey, we have a scholarship for this particular thing. Whereas our scholarships are really just to fund your goals and your dreams. So whatever it is that you want to come into the wine industry to do, we will help you get there. And it's also about making sure that you understand that there are paths outside of those two main things, right? So you can go and do and introduce people to that kind of thing. So we've created, we're about to announce the other 20 scholarships that we have. We just announced our partnership with Dujac and Burgundy and the Burgundy School of Business. And we'll be sending to Black students over there next year for 2 years to learn the entire system. We have incredible partnerships that we're building. We have 2 interns in Napa at two of the highly sought out wineries there. What we're doing is really like the work that everyone says that they wanted to do, and like really creating diversity from the ground up. And, again, creating that access and making sure that people have the tools that they need to go through the industry and be okay. So, if that means that we need to pay to help you get to take your exam, then we're going to pay to help you take your exam. If you need books, we will help you get books. If you need wine to taste because you have a specific kind of exam coming on, we will help you get that. There is not really a limit on what we'll help you do. Well, recent limit just popped up, but otherwise, it's your goal, and we're just here to help fund it and get you job placements and internships and mentors and all the things that we needed when we were coming up. We're just trying to tackle those barriers.
I'd really love at some point before the end of the discussion, if you could make sure to type in the chat the website so people can access it too and take a look. That's incredible work. And ladies, I have a couple of other questions I wanted to broach with you before we moved on to the question and answer session. One of them is about social media, and the other one is about wine clubs and online wine sales and how to do it, how to start it. But I thought maybe we'd start with social media, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of questions about, in particular about wine clubs, because they're already starting to come in. So social media is a way that we can promote ourselves, that we can respond to crisis, and that we can also even sell. So I'm curious, and I'll put the first question out based on social media. I'll maybe ask Magdalena to respond to this one. Do you use social media as an outlet to sell wine or market wine in Argentina?
Yes, of course. Of course, we use it a lot. And in fact, Wines of Argentina was a pioneer. Wines of in terms of online communications. We start with Facebook, we start with Pinterest, Twitter. Nowadays, we are working a lot on Instagram. So yes, it's definitely a must nowadays. But one thing is Wines of Argentina's accounts, and the other ones are the personal ones, I have to say.
And is there budget now devoted to social media in particular? Because advertising is quite interesting now, how it's become shown. There's almost a new career path called a social media influencer, wine influencer, specific to wine influencer right now. Do you find that an effective marketing tool?
Yes, I think it is. In fact, today we have more than 4 million people connected. And soon all human beings will be communicating through the internet. The entire planet will be connected. And social media is a great tool to reach people. So it's very important. It's very, very important. And in a period like the one we are living right now, technologies allow us to integrate large number of people into a new framework of economic relations and contact, and it's amazing.
It's interesting because I understand how can be some pretty great reach coming from social media and influencers in terms of marketing. Now, when it comes to influencers and you know, anyone here, speak up, Madeline or Tahira, there is certain criticism about the fact of what is paid and what isn't paid on the internet. How do you know if somebody is selling you something? How upfront should they be about that? Especially in terms of influencers, because those of us in the trade who have an online persona or do get paid for sponsored either articles or sponsored advertisement. How do you think that people should show that this is something sponsored and not? And do you think that the line is blurred? Madeline, you look like
I could start it off being like, this line has always been blurred, especially with wine for like the last 50 years. Wine writers used to only exclusively write for brands, and we've been sort of kind of like climbing our way out of that hole. If you look at old wine writing from a while ago, you'll like throw up in your mouth a little bit because it's so like for that, like written in that way. And so what I try to do, okay, so we don't accept, I will not, period, promote a wine brand. That's just one of our core ethics policies with Wine Folly specifically. I haven't really made any ethics with my personal accounts, but just because I'm so tied to that brand, I probably can't do it with that either, unless there's some really good reason why. And I'd probably be pretty clear about that reason. So I would say to each individual, what is the way that you're going to be honest and be forthright? Because this whole fake news things is like, we're really concerned about how people are being influenced. Fundamentally, we think it's gross, right? That being said, it's so totally fair for someone like Wines of Argentina or for a brand to be like, hey, I want to pay you money to do this. So so how will you do it? That's my question to you as an influencer. Stick to your program, whatever it is. Define that program clearly and what your offer is before you start letting people lead you down a path, because they'll just ask for what they want, and so define for it as what you will give before you get asked for what they want.
Yeah, and I would also say, like she said, like define what your value system is, right? Like, who do you want to be in alignment with? People send wine to me all the time. I hope that the expectation is they think that just because you send me a bottle of wine, I'm going to post it. If I like the wine, and I like the company, and I feel like the company promotes equity, and they're actually doing the work of being good humans, I might post it on my own, without being paid, and say, hey, this was good, but I'm not making like a whole video post and all that stuff, and actually putting like a whole bunch of effort into it, without being paid, for sure. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I tell people no all the time, because I'm very particular about who I align myself with and who I align my brand with. And kind of like what Madeline said, like it's hard to differentiate the two, from me from Hugh a lot of times. I do have a personal page, but my pages are very organic. Like, Madeline has it down. I don't even try to be there. Like, I'm very, very organic in my approach with both of my pages. I know, if I see something, I'm like, oh, I definitely want to support that, or I want to post it. But as far as being paid, I have a niche, I have a niche audience that trusts me, and that particular demographic is also very valuable. So I do know when someone's trying to use me just to get their wine in front of that demographic without, trying to accommodate me for that, that's foolish. That's marketing. You would pay anybody else for your marketing, but you don't want to pay the person who you want to put it out there. So if I even say yes, I do charge a lot for that, because I have a valuable demographic. I'm not going to pretend like I don't, and people trust me, and that also goes into it. So if I'm going to post your stuff, they're going to know that it's because I looked into this, and I actually believe in this brand, and they're cool, and this is something that you can put your dollars towards if you want to. But I'm also very transparent about that. I don't pretend like, it is something in my stories that I just happen to be drinking because people are interested in what I'm drinking. That's one thing. But as far as like making a whole paid post, it's going to say that this is a paid advertisement, and this is, just FYI. But I don't support things that I don't believe in. So if I don't like the wine and it's not good quality or whatever, I'm definitely not going to post it just because you offered me a couple hundred, or a couple, let's just say a couple hundred, leave it there, a couple $100.
Well,
So
I think
I think Sahira actually brings up a really good point as an influencer herself, of the decisions that she's made to sort of build her value system before she's accepting the things. And for each one of us, we're going to have our own thing that we're interested in. And one thing that I've noticed as the influencing thing has become more influential or whatever, it's you will get more people asking you. You'll know you're onto the right track because you'll get more hate, and you'll get more people asking you for help. So it's really important that instead of like letting people lead you along, that you are actually reaching out to the brands that you want to work with if you're excited about them, and be persistent, be annoying, delightfully annoyingly persistent, because you will get what you want if you actually do that little extra effort and just not wait for somebody to come to you.
And certainly, as you say, integrity does really show through with this, because, and choosing to believe in something and not working with something that you don't believe in, I think is really important. And as you both said, transparency about that is important, because as influencers, people have developed an important online reputation, and something that's quite significant and that you have a readership with. My company, Wine Align, we work with we do sometimes work with agencies. We do a lot of independent editorial work, but in terms of marketing, if somebody would like us to write a featured piece, we will certainly mention that right off the bat, that this is a sponsored article, but we always decide, okay, we are going to choose the wines from this group that we think are representative and that we think are best. So giving yourself also some editorial insistence that these be your words and not be someone else's words, so that the words come from you. You're not going to change everything, that this has to be consistent with your thoughts and your values. And when we get sent, hundreds of wines a week to review, we will review them, but it could be a negative review, it could be a positive review. And you're taking a chance when you send us a wine that it might not be a great review. And if you don't like it, we won't simply take it down. We'll give you a second chance. You can send us another bottle if you think there was something wrong with it, but that second review stands. But it's a very interesting question that I think in the online forum, a lot of people are struggling with and trying to figure out where they should stand and follow. So I really appreciate all of your insight on this. So I wanted to also now just change the subject to wine clubs, and this certainly does have, plays a role here, and online marketing of wine and creating a wine club. Now, there are a lot of questions here about how to start a wine club if you wanted to go that route. But Magdalena, have you done any campaigns with wine clubs, established wine clubs?
Not yet. We are planning because we are just launched our new business plan. So next year we are gonna do many campaigns with wine clubs.
Mm-hmm. Did you find it's an effective way?
Yes, it is an effective way. Yes, because I mean, a few months ago it was not impossible, but it was on our radar, under our radar, do that kind of campaigns. But nowadays it's a yes, definitely a yes.
Definitely. Well, I'm curious for Madeline and Tahira, are you involved with any wine clubs or at present, or do you plan on starting any wine clubs?
So the business that I merged my company into runs the largest wine club in Canada called Wine Collective. So I have some experience with their trials and tribulations of shipping wine in Canada.
And that's a lot of fun, isn't it?
And then the other thing is I'm involved in a couple of local sort of sommeliers starting wine clubs right now. And so I've kind of been with them on the ground level, sort of getting things started and seeing what their experience is on that front. And I also, when Wine Folly started, it was a wine club. So I have experience myself running albeit from 2011, trying to start a wine club in the United States, digital only wine club experience as well. So that would be my background.
Yeah, and what about you, Tahira? Are you involved at any wine clubs at present?
I actually, Madeline, yeah, I have a couple things going on that are brewing, and I'm actually working on a project that's going to involve wine clubs with brands of color, people of color, BIPOC, to kind of get that going. And yeah, that's it.
Yes. Okay. And so do you have any advice for any, sommeliers or trade people, restaurants here in Canada, for example, we've, and in Ontario, I should say in particular, have been given the ability now to almost start wine shops so they can deliver and send out wine with food, which is very new for us. We've never been able to do this, and we're under a somewhat restrictive monopoly that wouldn't allow this before, but due to COVID and struggling restaurants, they've allowed restaurants now. So in a way, they've become wine clubs, and they've put together, some very enterprising restaurants have started to put together online wine offerings that are available for delivery. So sort of a wine club. But do you have any advice? I know that Madeline, Tahira, you work primarily in the US, Madeline now coming into the Canadian market, and Magdalena, you work internationally. Do any of you have any advice on starting these clubs? Where to start?
Well, if you're in Canada and you want to ship across Canada, move to Calgary.
Good point.
I think that's the only state you can do it in Canada, and it's a very, very difficult process. That being said, I think the business model that Wine Collective is built off of, which is their parent company called Black Square, has some really interesting opportunities for those of you who are very industrious and actually want to ship nationwide in Canada. And they would probably be interested in talking to people about that kind of a thing, because they basically build out a distributor platform. Because you need to have, anyway, they build the framework, the logistics side, of that kind of thing. And we have something like that in the US. We actually have a few businesses that are basically like shipping houses that you can build a wine club on top of. And you can look at a few brands out there in the world, like Scout and Cellar or something like that. And they're basically built off of these big logistics brands. The interesting challenge with those logistics brands is they like to sell you their own product. And
Right.
so you don't have, and so I think the big issue and the thing that we need to build as a community, and it actually needs to be a community effort, is how do we get independent wineries or imported wines from other places and build an independent distribution system in the United States. And that's actually the hugest challenge we have right now. And just last year, there was a, I want to like name a Supreme Court case, and it's Tennessee retailers versus someone. And what happened was this issue went to the Supreme Court, basically saying that they were doing discriminatory retail by only allowing people with a Tennessee retail license that have been in Tennessee for 2 years to sell wine. And to be fair, these small retailers in Tennessee were totally backing this case, but because it went to the Supreme Court, it basically proved that we might actually be able to sell wine online in the US if you can go through the trouble of setting up the retailerships in the multiple states, that you should not be discriminated against in that way. If you have your head business in California or head business in New York City or something like that, so I think especially with this year with COVID, we actually have an amazing opportunity to keep pushing on that front. And I think if you look at the National Wine Retailers Association of America, that would be a really great association to join, to get involved in, because they do actually a lot of lobbying on that front on the US side. And I don't know the same one in Canada, unfortunately, but
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I think what you mentioned about one of the most difficult challenges is interprovincial or interstate shipping when it comes to wine clubs. And we have that problem very much in Canada. Technically, we're not allowed to ship still interprovincially. But, it is done, and the enforcement on it is spotty right now. Especially right now when there's so much happening and going on. But it is a challenge, as you mentioned. But I love the fact that there are places that you might be able to go to either encourage lobbying on that front of interstate shipping, or get some advice and ideas on what you can and cannot achieve. Is it the same thing happening in the US, where you're finding that restaurants now are getting into the business of selling wine in your areas?
Yeah, actually, I would encourage, if you're in the US side and you're interested in selling wine kits and things like that, to treat it almost like a restaurant. There's a really great tool. Everybody knows maybe Caviar or Grubhub. Those two platforms I really hate, and I don't like them because they charge a lot of money on top of the sale of the price of your food or your drinks or whatever. But I recently discovered chownow.com, and I don't know if it's in Canada or not yet, but they have just a monthly fee. It doesn't scale based on your sales or anything like that. It's a much better platform, I think, for selling like a dinner kit with wine if you're a restaurant, or a tasting experience, like to sell things as though they're like menu items. And that might be some really easy plug and play type of tool if you're starting a business in the US, at least, to get yourself in at a reasonable price, right? We are a business, it's going to cost money for sure. But I think their pricing model is a lot more fair to restaurants. And I hope to gosh, it takes over Caviar and that other brand, which Uber, I don't remember the other ones, but they're like stupid in my opinion. They just take way too much money, and that's not fair to the restaurants that are already suffering.
Totally, yes. We're seeing that, yeah, and restaurants shouldn't be penalized at this point, really. It's not helpful to anybody in the industry. If you don't have the restaurants there available, if they go out of business because of the fees that are extraordinary right now, then there's not going to be anything for those businesses to rely on. Well, I've got some questions that are coming in now. And for those of you who are watching, please do, this is the time to send your questions. I have a question for Magdalena from one viewer here. Wants to know, what has been your most successful online program during COVID and why did it work? And there's a third part to this, is what will you do differently online in 2021? So perhaps, Magdalena, we can start with what has been the most successful online program so far during COVID?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, we start the pandemic with the Malbec World Day, which is so far our biggest campaign. And it was aimed to be offline as usual. And then in just a couple of weeks, we have to switch everything and create an online campaign. So that could be one example. And the other example was our educational programs. We started doing, and in fact, we create two, which has been very successful. One from Latin American sommeliers, over 1 month with different lessons, and we reached 2,000 sommeliers from Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, so it was great. And also we start with the Napa Valley Wine Academy, and a specific educational program on Argentine wines. So I would say those two. And for next year, we are planning to launch a big campaign in the US and Canada market. So stay tuned, guys.
So I just a small question on that front, Magdalena. When you said you switched over Malbec World Day, what did you end up doing?
Well, we end up with more webinars, live sessions, different campaigns on all the social media channels we currently have. We focus on our blog and we create great content. We also change our website, which is right now quite nice, and educational as well. And well, we did a lot of that in just 3 weeks. So it was an important effort for us. We are a small team. We are a very small team.
So you kicked lots of butt.
No, and a pretty fierce online presence as well. So what would you do differently now in 2021? And you mentioned that, for example, like budgets are going to be a concern. Everybody's budgets are going to be a concern now in 21. But travel, there's not so many of these femme trips, and there might be room to do other things.
Oh yes, because we are saving some money, so we will encourage more digital networking. We are also creating new tools because we used to have a very strong program with hospitality. I mean, bringing people to visit Argentina and meet the producers and the wine regions firsthand. So it's completely canceled right now. So we are creating different tools with virtual reality and other things to try to reach those audiences that we had in the past. And well, we are still working on this new business plan and hiring a new agency. So many things are going on.
Is that quite expensive to give a virtual reality experience of a region? Because, as we know, it's going to be well before we're traveling. Is that something accessible that can be done, or is it quite expensive?
You have to be very creative. I mean, Wines of Argentina doesn't have big budgets. We have to start from there. And even if we are saving some money because we are not doing big offline events and things like that, it's still a challenge, but is accessible. And especially because we are trying to work with a lot of companies, local companies. And that's why I love to say that globalization is over. Nowadays, we have to focus on globalization. So most of our partners are small businesses from Mendoza, I don't live in the capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires. I live in Mendoza, in the wine country. So we are working with a lot of companies from here, and well, they are very competitive and creative and innovative. So it's great.
Oh, that's very interesting. And, you know, I'm passing that same question on maybe to Hira or Madeline. Have there been any online campaigns that you found particularly successful since COVID? The way that Magdalena has mentioned. I know I'm putting you on the spot here now, but it's a good question. You know, something that might be more successful now than it was pre-COVID. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, I've always been an online business. So, right. I would say the first live we ran with, and it was the first and the last, but it was very successful with, we did it with Laura Catena, and it was on Malbec Day. And
so is this a live event, you said?
Yeah, we did it on IG, okay. And it was fantastic. We basically just talked about Malbec for 30 minutes and tried to make it super light, but also a little bit mostly informational and fun. And we had a massively positive response after that. And it was really important to let people know when it was happening, what specifically they needed to do to make sure that they were there. I think a lot of the type of marketing we are doing that right now with the live type events is like letting people know when it's happening, right? And that's like the hardest thing, is to get people to show up, and calendar systems and things like that. Like that's actually the hardest thing, is to build a tool that makes it easy for people to add it to their calendar, whatever it is that they're using.
Exactly, especially when they're from different time zones and it seems to get mixed. I've had a number of problems with that with online events, where it's just in a different time zone. It wasn't made quite clear. So are any of you using Instagram as a video tool or live? Has it been successful, or do you think it's waning a bit?
I think lives work. I think that people were over them for a second, because when we first got locked down, everybody was on live. It was like you would look at Instagram and everybody was on live, and it was just like, I should do more lives, but they freak me out because I don't like not being able to see people I'm talking to. But I do think that there is successful for a lot of people if you can make them entertaining, and if you cannot focus on the number of people that are coming in and out, like that number changing consistently. I think if you're going to do lives, then you have to be confident enough to do a live if it's one person watching you, or if it's 150 people watching you. And I think that, you know, being able to save the lives, like having a plan when you're going in, is very helpful, and being able to save it and format it so that you can actually use that content on your page later is key, right? Because once the live is gone, it's gone. And I think Instagram is actually starting to catch up to that, because in the beginning of this pandemic, they weren't, but now they're making it a little bit easier for you to save the lives and download them to your phone and all of that kind of stuff. So I do think that it is helpful, but I also think that there is some value in Zooms, as far as like private Zooms, right? So sending out the invitation to people, it's a lot more intimate. You know, people won't feel as intimidated to ask questions or to engage and all that stuff. So seminars like this, they work because you feel more of a community sense, versus live. It's just like literally the world wide web, and all of these people are, you know, on there. So I think that you need to figure out what works for you, and also what works for your business model. You know, if you're a person and you can keep a live going and you're funny and whatever, that's great. But if you need like more structure and you want to present things and you have information that you want to give, I think that the private video webinar model is a lot more effective.
I do like the ability to exchange, but to your point about how long you can go on those videos, Do you think that people, in terms of wine audience, have a certain attention span that's only so wide for certain types of concepts? I know we just started a blind tasting at Wine Align concept, so you think you know wine. And we've tried to keep it really, really short. Previously, when we did these videos where they were edited, we tried to keep them to 5 or 6 minutes maximum, because we figured that that's the most attention span that people had. If they were to hover over a video and see 28 minutes, they probably weren't as likely to click on it as if it were something short and sweet.
I think it depends on who's talking, really. Like, some people want to hear you talk, and some people, you know, feel like, yeah, I'm not in the mood for that. Like, and I think that's with everybody. Like, some things you're in the mood for, and some things you're not. Some topics will resonate with you, and some of them won't. But the short attention span is very much an issue, unless it's like a deeper topic. Definitely trying to keep things short and sweet and to the point. And, you know, like Madeline said, like the visual is really important. So, you know, when you're posting these videos, you can't post a still like, you know, you got to have a cover picture on it. People don't put cover pictures on their stills, on their videos. So I think that the framing of it is important, and the engagement has to be immediate. Like, if you're going to have a long video, the engagement, you have to get people engaged immediately. Like, it has to be something very interesting. You have to be coming out of the gate saying something and not trying to like warm up and all of that stuff. So, and people will watch it in segments, you know, but usually they get sucked in if it's something they really want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to add to that, I would say, and you kind of pointed to this too, Sarah, is that whatever you choose to do, make a model for it and do it consistently, and do it over and over and over again. And you're going to have to do it 10 times until you actually start to see a thematic come through, to see what you're failing at that you can change and iterate on. But like, this is not going to, like, you might make something amazing once, but you've got to keep that cycle going. Like, if you're a writer, you got to write every day. You know, if you're producing content, if you're an influencer, you need to stay on that content influencing cycle. What are you going to do today? And it sounds like a workout, and in a way, that's what keeps you healthy. You know, so I will say though, speaking to content length, it really depends on the breadth and the depth of whatever you're talking about, and how entertaining you are. If you're one of those people where you find you're in a room and everybody's just like glued to you, and they're just like, you look like a train wreck about to happen, or you're just hilarious, or you're very compelling, like, then you know you can hold people a little bit longer. But if you are someone who you see people getting glazed eyes when you go to a group, like, figure out how to make things succinct. Use your own social fears to your advantage to know how you can affect the group, the design of your content that you create.
Yeah, because there's certainly a lot of it now, flooding. Everyone is producing video content right now because it's so easy to do so. But those are some really great tips. The visuals, putting on, you know, a cover to introduce it, making sure that you understand your own personality, just to recap, and how captivating you are, and also, you know, have a hook line right off the bat that keeps people captivated. So I like all of those. I just wanted to go back to a couple questions about the wine club as well too. So there are a couple things that I forgot to mention here. Somebody mentioned about in Canada, and I thought I would answer this question about starting wine clubs in Canada. At Wine Align, we have a significant wine club that's based here in Ontario, and we ship in Ontario. We warehouse in Ontario, and shipping even within one province has probably been the most challenging. But we have a great database already to use and which to market wine that's been very successful. We went from doing one case every 3 to 4 months prior to COVID to now doing several cases a month. And for people interested in getting into this, to know that it's a lot of work tasting and curating, and there's a lot you have to taste to get exactly what you want, and to make sure that there are people who are going to be receptive to your wines. One of the things that we do, and I know a couple of other wine clubs do, is that they have several people tasting, not just one person, because there's quite a variation in tastes that are out there. So it's important to have different perspectives, and that, if you get a wine that everybody aligns with, then you're pretty certain that, that it will have wide appeal for different groups of people that might purchase that case. And one of the things regarding restaurants, we actually started working with restaurants as a kind of relief for a while, and used as a channel for restaurants. But now things are much looser in terms of regulations. Agents can sell their own wines in mixed cases in Ontario the way that they never were before. And so they're doing a lot of this, and we're focusing really on curation. And I think that for those of you who are in the wine trade, just to realize that curation is something really valuable, especially if you've built up a lot of trust with your viewers, and those who may read what you're doing online. And that's something that trust that you can use in terms of curation to make those clubs successful. Just wanted not to forget to mention that. All right, and I'm curious if any of you have been working with specific restaurants in developing new programs after COVID, online programs. Have you worked in pairing food and wine together online, or doing any kind of work in that regard yet? I hear this.
Yeah, I've done that a couple of times. I've had to do food and wine pairings, and find a local restaurant to do it, because obviously, like, the shipping laws are different. So you have to find a local restaurants, and you have to find the local wine shops, and make sure that, the things that you're thinking about are being carried, or they can have access to them. I mean, it's a little bit more work than, person to person, but it's not like outrageous. Yeah.
In our case, we have also, we have created like an Argentinian experience. So we create a sort of a box with goodies, and that includes a partnership with different restaurants. So different gatekeepers that we are interested in will receive these boxes, and they will have like an Argentinian experience. So this is part of the hospitality program we are creating right now to replace the trips as well.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's another way that marketing agencies are going as well too, and it's another outlet. Either clubs or experiences, master classes in a box. You might have seen that cropping up in your various markets as well too, which I think is really intriguing, especially, as you said, the small bottle sizes, which not everyone can do, but if you're able to find somebody who can bottle those for you, and that way you can have a more affordable.
If I can add on that, we start this kind of master classes in China, because there's a master of wine, the only Chinese master of wine. This lady, she creates boxes and experience. So we were one of the first wines of offering this experience to students. So Chinese wine schools find a way, and they started like in April with this. We had this first tasting in April for Mother
I've
Birthday.
also seen two that, well, actually you could say three, because including the one Magdalena worked with, which is Napa Wine School. There's also San Francisco Wine School is now doing small shipped wine kits, and so they're called Master the World. Everything's master, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's right. Evan Goldstein is working on that.
Evan Goldstein is awesome. He's totally a mensch. And this guy put together basically a systematic tasting. He puts together systematic tasting kits. So they have to transfer the wine into little bottles, which is like the big challenge. And what I've noticed these guys doing is they have a system for doing that. I'm not sure how they handle it in an anaerobic environment or whatever, or if they're doing siphoning methods out of bottles or whatever. Regardless of how they're doing it, I noticed they're shipping very, very close to basically 2-day airing it or 2-day shipping these wines to their club members. So within the time that it gets transferred to the bottle, it gets directly to you, and that's exactly when the class happens. That means it's probably a very short, they're trying to reduce the risk of the wine developing a fault in travel.
Keeping the quality is a challenge with this kind of products. So yes, we have to be very careful.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's a few examples if you want to dig around on the internet. The ones that I know of, San Francisco Wine School is doing it, Napa Wine School is doing it, and Master the World would be the 3 that you might use as your research when you're digging around.
Making online education more accessible, because as you've all mentioned before, this medium is great. And Tahir was mentioning that Zoom in particular is a great medium for people to connect and ask questions, but it can be a challenge in this age to also taste together. And I think it's very important, when we're not just, immersed in theory, but that we also have the visceral element in which to draw from in our education and our collective education. Well, I can't believe our time is almost up here. And my watch just said she didn't understand. Sorry about that. Our time is almost up, and I believe we're going to have to close off the session. And now, unless anybody has any very, very last questions, we've got about 2 minutes maximum to come through. But in the meantime, does anybody have any closing words on or advice to give those that are looking to navigate a new online world in the wine trade?
I would say one thing as the last thing that I'm saying. I'm starting a huge project. The company that I merged with, I didn't merge with the wine club thing in Canada. I just want to make that clear. I think it sounded like I did. The business that I merged with, the guy runs a wine club also. Called Wine Collective, but the business that I merged with is called Global Wine Database. And if you are a winery and you want to be found on the internet and you want to have a conducive experience as part of a larger, how you fit into the wine world, like where you are located, if you're in Argentina, for example, we are building a massive database of all the wines, wineries, and wine information of the world, and systematically going through and producing regional guides for every single wine region of the world. So if you're a wine in a place and you want to get on board as an early adopter, I would encourage you to sign up. It's free. And there's obviously paid versions if you want to have all the fancy bells and whistles, but just to put your information in the system and to be found on those future regional guides is 100% free. And it's been a labor of love, and I'm very, very passionate about getting winemakers' stories from the wineries themselves up onto the surface.
So Madeline, this benefits both consumers then and trade?
Yeah, so the regional guides are going to be data driven. So we're actually going to be able to pull data directly from those wines to say something like there are this many Cabernet Sauvignons produced in this vintage. Nobody really knows that right now. It's a very powerful thought to think that you can actually sum up information about a wine region, not just through acreage data, which is our last way of doing it. And so you could actually find, hey, show me all the rosés made in, actually, I'm going to pick on you, Magdalena, but Argentina is producing more and more rosé and sparkling rosé with Malbec. And it's a very, very interesting, delightful a genre of style of wine coming from that region. So show me all the rosés of Argentina. I want to see them. And then who made them? And then you can dig through this online experience through the wines themselves. And it's a big project, and I would encourage anyone who's curious, who is running a winery, to get involved. We're going to be building amazing tools for you in the future to improve your digital experience online.
Could you add to the chat, Madeline, the website for them to get connected? That'd be great. Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. This is a really fascinating topic. Magdalena, Madeline, Tahira, thank you so much for joining us today. This is in support of a really great cause, raising funds for women in our trade, certainly very much needed during this challenging COVID situation. And I'd like to thank all of our viewers who logged on today and who have been logging on. This is as I mentioned, the 10th and final seminar. For those of them who missed it, shortly these will be available or replayed on the Femmes du Vin website. So please have a look there. Also pay attention for upcoming strategy, which will be unveiled regarding the New York Times article and subsequent thoughts from the group. Thank you once again and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, ladies.